Good morning to the audience. I'm Prof van Antwerpen. I'm from the College of Economic and Management Sciences. I'm a supervisor and I'm also our department's chairperson for the Ethics Committee, and I'm also serving on the College Ethics Committee. So it's my privilege today to share with you my knowledge. I'm open to questions, and I just want to warn you in advance that it depends on every college, their procedures and the way that they are following it. There is policies in place that I'm going to refer to, but what is very important is that colleges may have different procedures. So always confirm and engage with your supervisor, who will advise you to the correct procedures and the correct platforms. So I hope you are going to enjoy this. My song is a little bit lighter than Prof Ngulube's song. So enjoy. You are welcome to post your questions, and you are also welcome to ask questions afterwards. Right, I hope you are ready and refreshed, and that you are going to enjoy it. Thank you for the opportunity. Now, if we look at the picture in front of you, you will see that there is a scale weighing different things. So we can't see exactly what it is, but on the one side is wrong and on the other side is right. So we must ensure that as far as we go, we do things right, especially in the research environment, that you cannot make yourself guilty of following inappropriate procedures and conduct. So with this picture in mind, I'm going to give you a brief overview of research ethics. Now, we started initially, there is published the Nuremberg report, the Belmont report, and then from that, they have the Singapore Statement on Research Integrity. Now in Unisa, we follow the Singapore Statement, which guides us with exactly what is the right conduct and how to apply them. So you are welcome to Google the Singapore Statement on Research Integrity. I will also I've got it saved somewhere. I will also make that available so that they can post it on the source platform for you. So we are making use of the Singapore Statement, which guides us on how our policy should be compiled and the routes that we follow and how we need to conduct each other. Now, what is very important is that during our research approach and your studies, you need to be guided by the correct ethical approaches. Now, that will include various aspects that I'm going to refer to in a while. We have the Unisa policy on academic integrity from 2017, and then the research policy on ethics, the 2016 one. That is very important that you have that saved while you are doing your research, and that you have to work through those policies in depth. So that is part of your job as a researcher and a student in your postgraduate studies. Familiarize yourself with those policies. I'm not going to go into depth with it, but it is your responsibility. It's also available on the College of Graduate Studies site, where you can find them, as well as your college graduate section. Now, if we look at what is academic integrity, we follow the following definition or guidelines. We can define it as meaningful and concerted effort from your side to make sure that you concern human dignity, that you are always honest, that you are trustworthy, that you apply fair, truthful, and accurate information, that you respect other people and their views, and the responsibility in teaching and learning, research, platform, as well as in community engagement. So you can see that several aspects have been included here. So that all pertains to academic integrity. Now, just to give you a few examples on integrity is plagiarism. How easy is it to plagiarize? That is very easy. By taking the words of what is published by other people and to incorporate that in your study. By not paraphrasing it, by not referencing it, it's very easy to plagiarize. Zombie qualifications means that it is qualifications that are not really trustworthy, if it makes sense to you. What is a ghostwriter? I don't know if you heard about ghostwriters before. I will share with you my experience on that as well. Those are people that get paid to write content as if it is the specific author. So if I get a ghostwriter, for example, it means that I'm paying that person to write my dissertation or thesis or proposal on behalf of me, and I then present it as if I'm the author. They get paid, and this happens, you'll be shocked, but it happens in reality. And then also, what is synonyms for falsification? It's when you misinterpret information, forgery, fabrication, untruthful information that you present, and that you present information and innovation that is not truthful. That is sometimes the easy route to follow. But I'm warning you in advance, people, that we find this out. There's easy ways of detecting if information is not really ethically sound. One case that I came across in my journey is that I attended a colloquium. And then during that colloquium, the student presented the proposal, and we reviewed the proposal, we asked questions, and then after the colloquium, one of the people that were present in the colloquium said, but something doesn't sound right in that specific proposal. So the student, they investigated, and the student then completed the study, and I was appointed as an examiner. I didn't, before the appointment, know which study it was. So I was the examiner. I examined the dissertation, the marks have been submitted and whatever, and I've received the results from the other examiners. And then that particular candidate wanted to pursue further studies as a PhD. So what then happened is that the candidate submitted similar title for approval to register for the research module. So then red lights came up, and I mentioned that I've seen this before, and it was not accepted. So then the candidate went to another higher education institution and then proposed the specific title. So then one of the people that was part of the ethics committee then realized, but that seemed like something that has been investigated before. So when a search was conducted, they found out that that specific study has been conducted in one of our other provinces, and then just the names were changed. So that leads to the fact that the student or the candidate cannot register at other institutions, and they might also, after the investigation and legal actions, retract that qualification. So it might seem as the easy way out, but I warn you in advance, please don't follow that route. Right. Then what is research ethics? It involves human subject or people, participants, which raise unique and complex ethical, legal, and social and political issues that needs to be investigated. Now, the three objectives in research ethics is, firstly, to protect human participants. So, for example, you're going to conduct interviews, so it is to protect the participants that you require to provide you with information for your research project. Secondly, to ensure that the research is conducted in an ethical way so that it serves the interest of the individuals and the groups or society as a whole. That also includes the audience or the readers of the findings of the specific study, as articles will be published in reputable journals. Then finally, to examine specific research activities and projects to make sure that they are ethically sound. We look for issues that might be posing possible risks, that is to the researcher, the institution, as well as the participants, to protect the confidentiality of the participants, as well as to ensure that the process of informed consent has taken place. I'm going to explain to you what is the informed consent, and I'm going to explain to you how you should get hold of and apply for ethical consent in a while. Now, why is ethical clearance so important? As I mentioned, is to protect staff, students, and Unisa. Now, who is the staff? They are the supervisors, and then the students, that will be you that conduct the research, and Unisa as an institution. For scholarship, if you want to apply for scholarship, and for scientific research, also to mitigate risk. Now, risk can also be seen as an opportunity. Ethical conduct, I've explained to you about the falsification and fabrication and self-plagiarism. What is self-plagiarism? That means, for example, you have conducted a study, your dissertation or your thesis, and then afterwards you are doing or writing an article. You refer to that because that is your information. And then sometimes you can self-plagiarize yourself so that you get a higher score and in the academic field. So the more people self-plagiarize, that increase their references. So that is what self-plagiarism is. Unintended negative consequences, that's to protect the staff, students, and the university of that, to ensure that research is rigorous and scientific. Also, when people apply for funding, they need to have ethical clearance as well. Say, for example, staff members want to go on research and development leave. They need to have ethical clearance for that. Also, when we want to attend conferences, we also need ethical clearance for that. And the majority of journals, academic journals, also require the author who submits an article to also provide an ethical clearance certificate. I would like to also share with you what happened with me. When I did my PhD years ago, ethical clearance wasn't part of the process that we had to follow. We had to submit our measuring tools, and it was approved at all the different committees and levels. Also, what I wanted to do, my proposal, everything was submitted, but we didn't receive an ethical clearance certificate. So when I completed my PhD and I wanted to publish an article, that specific journal then requested my ethical clearance certificate. So the problem was that during the time that I conducted my study, as I mentioned to you, it was not, we didn't receive a specific or a document, a clearance document with a number that said that this is the problem, or that was the investigation. So it was not a requirement. Then I went to the institution and I said, listen, this is my predicament. What should I now do? So they said, and I'm also going to emphasize that as well, that ethical clearance cannot be provided retrospectively. So that was the predicament that I found myself in. It was not my fault. It was just simply the institution's fault. It was just simply, it was not a requirement. So, just to give you just a little bit of background. Now, why should you apply for ethical clearance? That is the question that we ask. As I mentioned to you, ethical clearance cannot be granted retrospectively. That means you can't collect information and data if you don't have ethical clearance. So that's very important, and you must please remember that. But your supervisor will also stress that fact and will guide you there, as well as the policies. Please read the policies and familiarize yourself with that. Okay, now the type of research that I'm going to do will guide you with regard to the specific forms that you need to complete. Now, there's 3 forms available. The first one is Form 1, that is primary research. Now, primary research means that you are going to collect data, qualitative or quantitative, from human participants. So that means they are forming part of your study. Secondary research is a Form 2 that we refer to. That means that no human participants involved. You are going to analyze secondary data. That is data that's already available in the domain. For example, reports of an organization. So that is something that is publicly available. That secondary data, you haven't collected it yourself. Also, conceptual research. What is conceptual research? Say, for example, you are taking a specific topic and you have a number of research studies that you would like to sort of combine and say that this is what author A with this particular study found. Another researcher found this. So you are taking the already published articles, for example, and then you come up with a new article and new finding. So that is conceptual research. That is normally not that challenging to get ethical clearance for it. And we use Form 3 to apply for that. There are templates available, institutional templates. You need to make use of them and also make sure that, say, for example, you start your ethical clearance process this year. Now, we are already almost in August, so we still have 1 day left. So you start now with the process, then you are making use of the templates available in 2019, but you don't finish the application, and then there's possibly some changes in your study, and you continue with the application of your for clearance in 2021. Sorry, I previously said 2019, so it's 2020. So you make use of 2020's documents and application forms and the templates, so you continue in 2021. So then it sometimes means that they grant you the first 3 months to make use of the previous year's template, but from that point onwards you have to make use of the new templates for that specific year. So please just bear that in mind. Then for those of you who conduct your study and your research in health-related domain, that is where we make use of case studies, health-related fields, health professionals. That is a very high-risk study. I'm also going to discuss with you the different risk levels, but just remember that if you conduct research in the health environment, that's sometimes very risky. Now, the process that we follow is that when a student submits your ethical clearance, it goes to specific, it depends once again on the processes that the college follows. So with that, I can't advise you. I can only tell you how it happens in our college. So there is an email address that you submit your final documents to. That is then screened, and then if the research and integrity advisor detect that there is some issues, ethical issues, it's basically sent back to the applicant, the student. And then when you submit it, it is then channeled to the Departmental Ethics Committee. Now, as I mentioned to you, I am, for our department, I'm the chair of that committee. So I receive the application, and then it is reviewed by 2 or 3 of the committee members. Now, we receive extensive training on ethics and how to conduct the review. And then for health related research, that is normally immediately channeled to the college ethics committee and review committee. So it doesn't go to the department because of the fact that it's high risk. Also for registration on the Department of Health database, and then for health related studies, it's mainly really a lengthy process because you need to get permission at different levels. So you need to start early enough so that it doesn't delay the process. Now, what do you need to have before you complete the form? Firstly, you need to know which form you need to complete. Also, you need to have a copy of your final proposal that says that it is approved. Also, the certificate or the results form that you received from the registrar that said that you passed the proposal module. So those of you who are busy still with your proposal module, keep that evidence because you are going to submit it when you apply for ethical clearance as well. So it is not the proposal result form, that is the officially stamped form that you have passed or successfully completed the research module so that you can continue with your official master's or doctoral studies. If you make use of questionnaires or interview schedules or focus group questions, you need to have that in place as well. Now, what is very important is that by the time that you apply for ethical clearance, those measuring instruments have been finalized, because as soon as you change them, you need to go through this process again, and it's going to delay your study as well. Now, the questionnaires or your interview or all of those that I mentioned, that's your data collection tools, they need to be 100% perfect. Consult a statistician that is an expert in stats if you are doing quantitative research. If you do qualitative research, consult then an expert who can guide you on your research or the questions that you ask in your interview guide or the focus group questions, that you are actually going to receive the necessary results and feedback from your participants or respondents. So you need to include that in your application, but you must have that ready. Gatekeeper permission letters, I'll explain to you who are the gatekeeper letters or who are the gatekeepers and what are their role. That's very important. So you need to have permission letters for that as well. You need to have a letter of consent. That means that you are going to have permission to conduct that specific study. That need to be on Unisa templates. Require them from your supervisor as well as or from the college graduate studies office. And confidentiality agreements. Now that is from your statistician in this case, or any consultant that you consulted to make sure that your measuring tools are in place. That is also includes, say for example, you are going to collect data by making use of a field worker. You also need to have a confidentiality agreement signed by your field worker. Now, what is a gatekeeper? A gatekeeper is a person or an institution that acts as an intermediary between you as the researcher and the potential participant that's going to form part of your study. Gatekeeper may also have the power to either grant or deny permission for access to potential research participants. So the gatekeeper is the person or the institution that says, okay, fine, you are allowed to conduct research, say for example, within a specific company. So they say, and they grant you permission and say that they give you the green light to conduct the study. You can't just complete the ethical clearance and start with your study without having that information, because what's going to happen if you say that you are going to use, for example, the South African breweries to conduct your study, and they haven't given you permission and act as the gatekeeper, and then when you apply, you realize, oops, I don't actually have the permission, then your entire study is going to fall flat and you won't be able to execute that. So that you need to get in advance. Also, if you want to conduct the study within the South African breweries, but you only want to make use of the HR department, for example. So you need to have a gatekeeper letter from the South African breweries as a company, and then also from the person who is responsible for the HR division or department. So that means it's 2 gatekeeper letters that you need to have there in place. As I mentioned previously, you have to make use of the Unisa templates that's available from your supervisor, and I also guided you. Letter of consent. You need to have information letter for your survey, or if you are going to conduct interviews, the participants must know exactly what your study is about, what do you want to do, why do they play a role in your study, what is expected of them. So that is the information letter. The gatekeeper letter, I've attended to that as well. Confidentiality letter, that indicate that you are going to treat them with their information with confidentiality, sorry for that, and then also that you are not going to expose them. So that is also for anonymity as well. Then documents need to be embedded in your application form. You are going to see if you are going to apply with Form 1, if there's human participants, it's quite a lengthy document. So we do not want you to include the gatekeeper letters, the participants information letters, letters of consent, your measuring tools, to add them as annexes or appendices. You must embed them in the document so that when we review it, we click on the embedded document and we can open that. The reason why we do it that way is because it's been sent digitally. Say, for example, your proposal is quite extensive, the measuring tools quite extensive, occupies a lot of pages, then to send that through email is a challenge. Then it's a lengthy document that contains too much information. So that's the reason why we embed the documents. Then also, as I mentioned, no attachment, no annexes, because it just adds to the length of the document. What is the role of your supervisor? First, they are the ones that would guide you and provide you with information, and to assist you, you need to complete the form, but they are there to guide you and to provide you with answers where you have challenges. We as supervisors also screen your application before you finally submit it. It means that we ensure that all the documents are included and embedded, that you attended to all the questions asked that you need to complete. Also, that when you submit it, your application is not delayed due to the fact that there's incorrect information that the reviewers might pick up. Also, the final document will then be distributed to the department or the college ethics committee. You are not allowed to submit your ethics application without the consent or the assistance of your supervisor, because the supervisor must also sign the document. So please just remember, you are not allowed to submit it without the advice and the knowledge of your supervisor. Then quality is extremely important. Why is that important? I've also indicated here with a sign that you need to pay attention to quality. Nothing is as bad as if an applicant submits a document and then spelling, grammatical errors, incorrect information, information that is not included, that is really doesn't reflect good on the student. Different obstacles that we come across, your application cannot be processed if it doesn't contain all the information. So make sure that there's not any missing documents. Also, we advise you not to go and copy and paste. It doesn't look professional. By the time that you do your proposal and the time you apply for ethical clearance, some things might have changed. Your writing style might have changed. You have evolved as a researcher. So make sure that you don't just copy and paste because things might have changed from your proposal. It's important that you edit and spell check your document. Remember, it's not the responsibility of your supervisor. There is tick boxes that you need to tick yes or no. Don't just say yes, yes, yes to everything. Read your questions and make sure where it's not applicable that you click the no or you tick the no option. The necessary signatures must be obtained, and write in your application everything in full sentences. Don't use abbreviations and acronyms that the reviewer don't understand. Full sentences. If your English is not your first language, get it language edited, and also remember it's not the job of your supervisor to do that. If you make use of Form 1, you will see that there is a section that refers to risks. Now, if you look at the first column, it's category 1, it's negligible risks, that there's no interaction with human participants. That is when you, for example, conduct conceptual study. If you make use of already published articles that's in the public domain. Category 2, low risks, when you involve human participants. If there is a potential for minor discomfort or inconvenience, say for example, you have to schedule an appointment with them and they can't make it. So that happens if you, for example, want to do an interview with them, it might not suit them. So that is then a low risk. That is when you do questionnaires, surveys, qualitative research methods. Then medium risk, direct human participant involvement. It possesses risk above everyday norm. For example, physical, psychological and social risks. If you might ask questions that might have an impact on the participant. Say, for example, they were traumatized and you ask a question and they recall that, they might need the assistance of a psychologist afterwards. So that is then a medium risk. High risk, that is, as I mentioned, where you include health studies, for example. Direct human participant involvement, real foreseeable risks that you know beforehand, when there is can be harm like physical, psychological, and intervention might then be included, so that when there is risks involved, high risks, so that it can be mitigated. Now, possible minor and major risks, include that in all in depth in your application. Don't just omit them. Include that. Also, the reviewers must be able to see that you have considered all the risks. There can be minor risks, but please reflect that in your application. Also, you must discuss and indicate how are you going to mitigate that risk if it do occur. It's very important in qualitative research. For example, when you are going to interview, where there's focus group interviews and observation, how are you going to mitigate that? Don't just think that the reviewers accept it. We need to see that you have considered everything. Now, different types of risks, some of these I have explained and touched on. You must show that you have considered them. How are you going to mitigate the risk? Different risk levels. Also, examples of minor risks, time management that I've mentioned, the venue might not be suitable, you have to change to another venue, any discomfort, people might be scared of the fact that people in the organization might be able to identify them. And then significant risks, when your study include sensitive topics, when there's emotional discomfort, confidentiality, fear of unintended negative consequences. Now, you also need to include about 2 or 3 paragraphs that cover those aspects, refer to the ethics committee and supervisor who can also assist you there. Now, you are familiar with the fact that we are dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic. We couldn't foresee that things were going to turn out the way that it's currently. We don't know what tomorrow will be, how it will be like. We don't know what challenges we are going to face. So students who applied for ethical clearance, some now sit in a position where they need to adapt their methods to collect and ways to collect data because of the fact of contamination. For example, you can't see more than a specific number of people in a focus group. There's different things that you now need to bear in mind. We don't know how next year might look like. So also, if you apply this year, just consider the possibilities as well. There has been a statement provided to all people from Unisa with regard to data collection during the COVID period. Also read the Unisa guide. And this is especially applicable to qualitative research. When you do quantitative research, you can do that if you look on that screen with questionnaires that you distribute online. I'm having a student currently who applied for ethical clearance. It was granted. The study entails people from the traffic officers and traffic inspectors. So initially, the student intended to go to the specific shifts that those people are working to hand out the questionnaires, and they have to submit it afterwards. Now we have a problem with all the sanitizing, all those things. So she had to change the plan of how to collect data. Otherwise, the entire study had to be put on hold. So additional letters of consent had to be requested and gatekeeper letters that had to be attached to the application. Then interviews and data collected methods, I have discussed that, as well as the different phases and stages. Bear in mind the POPI Act that must accompany your research. Google POPI Act, they are busy in the process to update the POPI Act, is how to protect people, but unfortunately they are still busy with it. It's not signed off yet due to the pandemic. Now, the measuring instrumental tool, there's certain questions that people tend to include that really don't add value to your study. That is, for example, demographic information. Do you need to know if people are married or not, their marital status? Does it really contribute to your study? You must ask those questions. Do you need to know if it's not applicable, their gender? Then you don't include those questions. It depends on your study, and it depends on what your research question is and what you want to find out. So be careful for specific questions, especially the demographic questions, so that you don't include anything that might not contribute to your study. From the 1st of July, you may only use Unisa template gatekeeper letters. If it's not on the Unisa template, they're not going to accept it. We do not consider any emails. Say, for example, you ask permission from the CEO of a company and they say per email, yes, it's fine, you can continue with that study. That is not allowed. It must be a formal document on the company letterhead that will also be included in your ethics application as well as in your final product. Details must be provided, how information will be accessed, also signed by the person accountable for the company or someone who speaks on behalf of the company. Then also, some institutions like government departments has got research departments in place. I'm busy with a study at the in the police service, so they help me with my ethical clearance, submitted to them. They deal with those processes. So some government departments has got research offices, so just find out and have that knowledge available so that you know that you follow the correct route. Like, for example, the Department of Education, the district is involved, then the school is involved. Say, for example, school children will be forming part of the study, then the parents must also provide their consent. Now, this process can really take very long. So make sure that you do it in advance, that it doesn't delay your study. Things that you need to keep in mind, grade 9 is the literacy level, that's vulnerable participants, conflict of interest. If you're going to collect data at the company that you work, how are you going to mitigate that? Your groups and sampling, who will be included and who will be excluded from the study. Also, if the researcher as objective third-person party, take note of the venues available, time constraints. People in top management don't always have time. So just bear that in mind. You are not allowed to provide any remuneration, gifts, reimbursement to the people who participate in your study. Not at all. Demographic variables, I have attended to some of these. Regard the POPI Act. Read what is expected of you, what might be included and what not. And then also certain questions, is it really pertinent to the outcome of your study? If not, take it out. As I've explained to you, things like marital status and all of those are really outdated. If you look at previous studies conducted a few years ago, don't just copy them because some of those variables are really not adding value to your study. Obtaining access to participants, indicate per group and explain to them how are you going to conduct the research. Also explain to them how will they be identified, whether they should take part of your study, who are they, their contact details, how are you going to get hold of them. They must know the process and it must be known in your ethical clearance as well. We want to know that. Also, any communication that's going to take place or had been taken or that you had in the past, include that as well. How will you interact? How it's going to take place? I've mentioned the field workers. If you are going to make use of them, how are you going to train them? Who are they? You must also have their consent and their information included in your ethical application. If there's any conflict of interest, there's a very fine line. If you work in a specific company and you conduct your research there, data collection, be careful that you don't request people to complete your questionnaires, that you are not interacting with them and ask them to increase your return rate or participant rate, that you don't request anything from them that might put or jeopardize your position and your integrity. With quantitative research, I mentioned that the survey questionnaire must be edited. It must be quality or a document of high quality. The front page must be included, that is the participation information letter, as well as the letter of consent. So we need to see the final document. It must be approved by a statistician. And remember that after clearance has been granted, if you change, you can't just change anything on your measuring tool. How are you going to administer it? Step by step must be included. And now with the COVID-19 pandemic, how are you going to mitigate it? Your best option will be to conduct online surveys. The challenge there is that if you conduct a study in some of the government departments, they only have intranet, they don't have internet. How are you going to mitigate that? Also, if you email the questionnaires, it must be in such a way that the participants can complete that. We need to know how you're going to mitigate the COVID-19 pandemic and the restrictions with that. Qualitative research, also again, your interview schedule must be edited, the questions must be appropriate. Also, your letter of consent must be embedded where they ask you to do so. Again, only Unisa templates. Here you can make use of Teams meetings, for example, for interviews. You can have Skype interviews. Make sure that you record that. And then also inform your participants that take place in an interview that you are not going to, for example, record their faces. You are going to record the conversation. So just keep that in mind. If you are having interviews or whatever, just how are you going to mitigate that and make sure that you ensure that their anonymity has been protected. Conceptual or secondary data, the nature, is it in the public domain? Is there a link to that available? Have you tested the link? Does it work? Conditions of access. Does it say on the website that there are specific conditions? How are you going to get hold of that information? May you use that? So just find that out from the website as well. Keep in mind the POPI Act. You should acknowledge anything that you include. And then when you complete your ethical clearance, please provide more information than not enough. There should be adequate information so that the reviewers know exactly what to review. As soon as we have questions, we need to refer it back to the student, and then this process is delayed. So I advise people to rather than include more information than one-line sentences. So just be careful. Ethical considerations. How are you going to store the data? Is it going to, are you going to lock it? Is it in a safe box? How long are you going to keep them? Who will have access to them? The policy says that you need to store the data for 5 years. What are you then going to do with it? Are you going to shred? If it's hard copy stuff, are you going to shred it? If it's digital information, are you going to delete it? Is there any backups? How are you going to deal with that? And how are you going to preserve information? 5 years, I've mentioned that. There should also be confidentiality agreements. That is where the statistician comes in, if they have access to this. If you have a qualitative study and your interviews need to be transcribed, that means you're going to make use of the services of a data transcriber. You must also have confidentiality letter from that person. And choose all your options. Will it be published in a thesis, a book? Are you going to use the data in conference papers, in articles? Remember, no compensation for participants and access as agreement with your gatekeeper letters. I know that, or I hope by now you can see the importance of the gatekeeper letters. That is really people to safeguard you and to ensure that your study is not delayed if you don't have all the gatekeeper letters. So that is my story for today. I hope you have enjoyed it, and I thank you for the opportunity.